So, so before lunch, we were talking about certified security framework for ensuring that messaging between uh, endpoints and federations takes place. So there was three factors. There was making sure your um, infrastructure was secure, using the traffic light protocol for communications, and having a security contact uh, published in your federation metadata. Having that federation metadata with the security contact is great. But how does somebody look up and find a security contact for a organization that is impacted by a security incident? And Refeds are providing this tool called METS, which is the Metadata Explorer tool. And it allows you to search for entity IDs or IDPs or service providers. And once you've found the IDP or service provider you're interested in, you should be able to find if they have a security contact or if they actually participate in Certify.
Okay. I should choose technical.edugain.org instead.
Sorry,
I would choose technical.edugain.org instead.
that's one option. This
Uh,
includes all the
uh,
non,
because this one can have wrong data.
it's fine.
Yeah.
NIH actually recommend this one. So this covers all federations, and all identity providers and service providers, whether they're in eduGAIN or not. Whereas the eduGAIN one only covers stuff that's in eduGAIN. So very simple tool to use. You stick in a search thing. So I'm putting in the virtual home, which is my identity provider. Got the search button. Oh, searching, hit return. And it provides me a list of IDPs that include VHO. And as it would be, the AAF is listed first. So that's my IDP. I click on that IDP and it shows me a whole bunch of interesting stuff. It's an IDP. It's been registered under this registration policy. It's part of all of these federations. It claims to do certify, which is what I'm looking for. So I can know that if I communicate with this identity provider, it will know how to do the certified protocols, traffic light stuff, and so forth. And if I keep scrolling down, some stuff about the entity properties and some technical details. And this is what I'm after, support contacts. And lo and behold, all support contacts are the same. They're all AF support. Sorry, another there. Yep. That's security. So if you look for other, click on that. That'll give you an email address you can use to contact security people at this identity provider. So if there's a bad person coming from this identity provider, the service provider is capable of finding this contact information. Do one more, which is that one. So Nectar is a research cloud in Australia. So the Nectar Research Cloud, we'll have a look at the actual research cloud, which is this guy. It's only a member of the AAF and Tirakiri. When we scroll down and we see they have not provided any contact information, not good, so we need to fix that up. And they also don't support Certify, so we need to fix that up, keep them supporting Certify. So this particular service provider would be in a bit of trouble if they were being attacked by somebody. We knew they were being attacked by somebody. There's no way for us to contact them, find out their contact details because they haven't published that information. Okay, it's met.refeds.org. Okay. How's that? So that's one tool you can use. As Al said, there's another tool out there which I can get you fairly easily. Which is another search tool. This is the eduGAIN search tool, and it allows me to search. It's got more options for searching on. If I just stick in VHO here, do a whole match search, I think it would do, and hit show. Oh, no. There we go. So we got the virtual home IDP. Look at the entity details in that one. Similar sorts of information. It supports research and scholarship. It's got certified, has been asserted. So it's just a different format by the same information. And it's got contact information. This time it's actually telling you that it's a refed security contact, which is the one we're actually after. And it's slightly different. It's actually security at aaf.edu.au. Got the same name, I expect. The email address is different. So you'd want to use the security one to notify us of any security incidents that are occurring and are impacting on the virtual home.
The UI here is better than in Met. It's easier. Here you see security. You don't need to.
Yeah, that's a guess. Okay, so that's a couple of tools for helping you to identify the security contacts at other organizations or entities within eduGAIN and within other federations. Can't find the other presentation, but it's a more detailed one on certified. I'm just going to skip straight past that. All sort of crap. Start up a new PowerPoint. Let's build a presentation as we go. It should be fun. So this afternoon, we're going to talk about connecting a service. What can go wrong with connecting a service to your federation or to eduGAIN, and what can go wrong if you have a service in eduGAIN that you want to connect to your federation. So the first slide, why connect? So why would you connect a service into your federation? What are the benefits that would be found in connecting a service to your federation? And I'm just going to open it up to the room. Anyone who's interested in talking to me can let me know. Otherwise, I'll just start typing stuff. So you get single sign-on. Which is a benefit for users to access services. Have one username, one password, and it's maintained and managed by your by your organization. So that's a benefit for the user, that they only have one password or one username and password to deal with, and one multi-factor authentication thing to deal with. Next up, another benefit of connecting your service to the Federation is user credential management. It is outsourced. That's a benefit to the service provider. They don't have to worry about maintaining many user accounts from many organizations. That problem has been passed on to the identity provider to deal with. So the identity provider is issuing usernames, issuing passwords to their staff, to their students. When a service connected to the Federation asks for a username password, they don't have to know anything about it. They just send the user off to the university, and the university logs them in and sends them back to the service. So that's another good reason why to connect your service to a Federation and to eduGAIN. Any other benefits you could think of? General high-level benefits. And we just spoke about one. Starts with S. Improve something, starting with the letter S. S, yeah, someone's out there listening. And that benefits everybody. The user benefits, service provider benefits, and the IDP benefits. Because the surface attack area for the bad guy to attack and try and infiltrate your organization is limited to one site, and that's your IDP. So you can put all the fences and barriers and moats and other technology around your IDP to make it as secure as possible and try and eliminate any infiltration by the bad guy. You can put multi-factor authentication on to try and help the user, protect the user from themselves and from phishing and other attacks. And for the service provider, they have a high level of assurance that this user is a valid user from the university. So that's another sort of fairly significant benefit. And another one for the IDP, more around usability, but they can put everything behind one IDP to get that single sign-on and that improved security, reduced surface attack type stuff. So those are the three biggies that I see. Any others from the peanut gallery? Yep.
It's very likely that your campuses will run, your help desk will send emails every so often telling people about phishing attacks. Don't put your passwords into websites and things like that, just randomly. Often when I'm working at a campus, I will use Google. I'll type in site : the name of the domain name of the campus, and then the word login. And then I will go and get the sort of the top 10 or 15 websites of the campus, because there will be at least that many. And then I'll ask people at that campus which one of these login pages is legitimate and which ones are fake. Invariably, they're all legitimate, right? But they all look different. And you're trying to educate your users not to throw their username and password into any website you find, but you will run like a help desk tool in the cloud. So it will have a different domain name. It won't have your home domain name. You'll use an onmicrosoft.com domain for storage. Zoom, you'll have Zoom in a domain that's not your own. All of these are legitimate university services, but they all use different domains and they all look different. And then you tell your users, don't just throw your username and password into anything, except you yourself will not be able to pick which ones are legitimate and which ones are fake.
Even more, it's very hard to get the users to use different passwords in different services, and that means they will use the same password privately also.
They'll store it in their browser.
And store in the browser, that is given nowadays.
Yep.
Yeah, you're happy if they have a real password manager, but otherwise they use the Google or Edge or Firefox password manager. They are better than nothing.
Yeah, the users, if you don't provide a password synchronization system to all of these services, your users do it for you. But then the problem is they forget their password or they get locked out and they then ask the help desk to reset it, but that only resets it for 4 services. And their password is now different for Zoom and different for something else. It becomes confusing to the user on which password is legitimate anymore. And it makes it difficult for you to do two-factor authentication or other higher levels of assurance because you've got so many different password properties out there. And so it's a big job, but you actually have a very big job just on the campus, managing and corralling the services so that you don't have too many.
So building an SSO system for your campus is that is often the most important part of it. When you have done that, going out to do a federated is just a walk in the park, more or less. Then your researchers can go out to go to services like CERN or LIGO and so on to do their research with the research companions from all over the world. So the benefit is more local than you think. The small number of researchers will benefit extremely, but the IT department doesn't see them because the researchers are more or less a non-existence for universities from an IT department side. We have seen that. I've seen that for many years in Sweden. The IT department doesn't see the researchers, see the teachers. They see the students, but not the researchers. Because the researchers they are teachers. They may not be teachers, but their needs is not seen outside. Their need is outside the university, not within the university. That's the thing.
And the funniest story I heard was a university moving quite a few of its major systems all behind its federated identity in the organization. And they were so worried that the user experience would be different. They employed more people. So all of their casuals they employed on their help desk, expecting lots and lots of phone calls. And in the first week, can anyone guess the number of phone calls they received because login to university systems was now different? 0, right? 0, because it's good because with web single sign-on built in, when they log into the first system, each additional system they just automatically connect to. But people were not surprised that the look and feel was different because it's so different anyway because of the services. So when you consolidate them all behind one service, it makes it easier for the institution. It's easier for the help desk, and it's actually what your academics and students will come to get used to. And they should be confused and potentially scared if they go to a site that doesn't automatically remember who they are and doesn't automatically log them in, because maybe this is an attempt to phish them, or it's a service run by the student association that isn't, legitimate, or it's run by someone in the School of Engineering, right? And it isn't legitimate. all of these systems, if if you've been around universities as long as I have, you'll start off by doing LDAP for all of these, but it means these different systems actually capture a password and replay it. And that's not good because you have to then trust the engineering department and the student association and everyone that deploys a local service. When you move to SAML Web Single Sign-On, that password cannot be intercepted. And so you can allow the student association to make a service and know that they're not harvesting the passwords of other students, right? These services, they just can't do that anymore. And so while LDAP, I think there used to be, maybe it was, I remember her name now from Switzerland. I was going to say Anne. It is Anne. Okay. Had this evolution diagram of logging, right? And so LDAP was a common campus service, but actually it requires quite a level of trust if you allow other departments to offer services, right? And it becomes harder and harder to maintain. Web single sign-on means you don't have to be concerned by that.
So out of that discussion, I've come up with a fourth dot point, which is improved user experience. So the user benefits because of the improved experience, but also the support desk has a reduced effort to run the university identity management stuff. So they have less password change requests, less lost password, all that sort of stuff that happens when you do single sign-on.
And the fifth bullet is improved user attribute management. Because you have one place to handle user attributes, one place to change name for user, one place to change the email address, and so on and so on. And all servers get the information.
And an issue that some people bring up every so often is they're worried about people sharing accounts, right? Students sharing their accounts with other people. Now, when you do this, the password is used for everything. It's used for the site that has all of your financial information regarding, your education. It has all of your grades. It has your submission system for assignments. It has your timetable. Maybe if there's a campus medical service, it has your health records. When you increase the value of the identity, you decrease the desire of the student to share this with other people, right? The identity becomes valuable, and so they're more likely to protect it, because if they share it with a stranger or with a colleague, a peer, there's much more you can do with that account now, right? Because it's one username and password for all systems consolidated. So if you're worried about users sharing accounts with a wider group, increasing the value of their identity actually removes this as a problem.
It's also harder to share an account if it's got multi-factor authentication turned on.
Of course, but there is one system that should not be shared password with the host, with the federated login, and that's eduroom. Because that password, username and password you save in the system if you don't use certificates. So that should, by security reasons, be their own login, different login than REST.
So that's why some of the benefits a service provider and users and identity providers will get out of joining your federation. Slide. So what service providers want when they have somebody log in? So first thing they want to know is they want to know that the person is from a university. So they want to ask the authentication to occur. They want authenticated user from an institution. And by being part of the SAML Federation or the Identity Federation, when a user logs in, they will know that that person has been authenticated and verified by their university. So that's a great thing for the service provider. They can restrict access based on who's in the Federation and who's not in the Federation. But that's only the beginning. They've got a yes, no tick. This person's a federated member, is part of that university. So what else do they get from being in the Federation? Well, they'll know which organisation the user is from. Without passing any attributes at all, by default, the identity provider will provide its entity ID, which is its technical name, to the service provider when that user logs in. So the service provider, without knowing any more information about the user, already knows where they're from. Now, it's not a pretty name, it's a technical name. So they might want some more information about that. So they might want to actually know the name of the organization.
So that is in metadata anyway, so you can get it from without getting any attributes. Yeah, display name of the organization.
So
they want to know whether you paid for the service or have a subscription. I mean, most services are they cost something, right? And so they just want an easy way of verifying that you've paid. And they don't need to know who you are individually. They just need to know that your organization has paid because they just want to make it as simple for themselves. They are lazy, just like me, and they want to make it as simple as possible.
Or as I call it, eligible user. Yeah, because you have service that it does not cost anything, but you are restricted to a specific organization.
I think the Czech biomedical atlases from the Charles University is one of the big examples. They will allow anyone in any academic federation to get access, but they cannot offer you a guest account to log in. It is too burdensome for them. It does not scale. They used to do that, and it just was too much effort for them to give away a service for free. And they didn't want to charge for it, but they couldn't sustain guest accounts. And so Federation gives them the metrics that they need to show that the wider community is using it, and they don't need to collect fees for that. And yeah, and service providers, they don't want accounts that can be hacked. They want to limit guest accounts where possible, because often guest accounts become shared accounts that your research librarian will create to access a journal, or IT services will create for a cloud service. But they do not want those passwords leak, and then they get sold.
And they also get stale. They say not used anymore, and that is a real security risk.
So for our service providers so far, it's very simple service. They just want to know that the person's from an organization, and for certified reasons, they want to know which organization they're from. So if there is an issue, they can do the certify stuff backwards and forwards to the IDP, and they have enough information at the moment to be able to do that. But they have no information about the users themselves.
So they give their user anonymous access.
Yep. And that's great if you have a service that just wants to provide content and doesn't want to remember what user has visited the service, or how many unique users have visited the service. We can't count unique users without entities, can you?
So there's also always an identifier transferred. There's also session ID, but that is just a number counting up.
So that's the number of authentications.
Yeah.
Not the number of unique users.
Yeah, that's correct. Number of usages, not number of users.
So they can work out the number of usages from each organization. And that might be useful, and they might want to charge on the number of times person bodies log in.
Yeah. But if it's a journal company, for instance, and you're using IP-based authorization, so you have to be on campus to access that service, they don't know whether it's one person behind your natted service accessing a journal resource or 100 people. And so this is, while the service provider sort of doesn't care, the service provider needs to provide statistics to your research librarian to justify the journal cost, but they don't know themselves whether it's, one student reading 100 research papers or 100 different people reading 100 different research papers.
And this is that type of anonymous access is quite interesting, quite useful. We have a lot of services within eduGAIN doesn't want to have any personal data on any user at all, because that is a hindrance for them. Journals doesn't want to know this for more than one reason, but the most important reason is that access to that type of information is protected by law, that it should not be traceable in many countries.
So far it seems fairly easy. Just join your federation and you get all this stuff free.
This anonymous access, because it is anonymous access.
You get anonymous access free, you get people to log in. And we have a question. Yep.
What is the number of uses from okay. Number of uses from each organization that what service provider want. The last point, can you
so if you log into the service 5 times,
okay,
that's 5 usages.
Okay.
If Brooke logs in another 5 times,
okay,
that's 10 usages.
Okay.
But we don't know who those 10 usages are from.
Okay.
Hal logs in 10 times, that's 20 usages.
So that is a uses, not a user.
Not individual. Yeah.
Okay, so
yeah.
Okay.
So that brings up the next point. How do they count individuals? We want to know how many individuals from your organization accessed your services, not how many times people.
So if I do 10 times, then it's a 10 users. Not a single user, it might be double user or 3 users.
In the first case, we don't care. That's the thing. We don't want to know anything about the users.
Okay.
You only want to know that you are from an organization. Perhaps you want to know how often the service is used by that organization, not by whom of the organization.
Okay.
So the next question the service provider will want to ask potentially is how many unique users are there from the organization? Now we have to do some work because we have to start asking for unique identifiers from the identity provider. So there are a number of those. We need a unique ID for each user to be provided. So to be able to count individuals, the number of individuals that are actually using your service, we need to start asking for information about that individual. And there are a number of options. And the old way of doing it would be to get the eduPers or a persistent name ID. I'll wait it, but that persistent name. Or this.
Those 3 are pseudonymous identifiers. So they are not traceable between different services. And they are pseudonymous, so you cannot see what user it is.
Yep.
You can see that it is a user, a specific user, because it always comes back with the same identifier, but it's not pointing out who, it's just pointing out that it's the same person.
So if we go back to the example where you logged in 5 times, Brooke logged in 5 times, and Pal logged in 10 times, we now, with this information, can say there was 3 unique users. And user 1, we don't know who user 1 is, did it 5 times, user 2 did it 5 times, and user 3 did it 10 times. So your most active user is user 3, but we still don't know who user 3 is, which is that pseudo-anonymous type of access. So that's good. It's not too much personal information. There's really no personal information being released.
So there is a personal information, but it's not pointing out a specific individual.
Yep.
And so previously, you might have thought that 20 different people were using 20 different resources, and you didn't have that visibility before, right? So the statistics that your journal company would provide you would give you this number of people, but they couldn't verify that either. You couldn't verify it. And so you were thinking that there was a lot of use, potentially, 7 times more use than you were really getting. But now you've got a more accurate result. And so, then you have a better way of judging the value of your journal subscriptions, right?
So having this unique identifier for a person, there's another benefit that the service provider can get from this. And that's that they can remember this person's logged in previously and accessed this set of journals. When they come back again, the same persistent identifier will be provided to the service. They can say, hey, you looked at these sets of content before. You might also be interested in this other stuff. A bit like in Netflix saying, here's the movies you've seen before. Here's some interesting stuff that relates to your previous visit. So it can do that sort of previous visit type stuff, but still anonymously.
Building user-proof, 7 anonymous user profiles. You can even get how you set up the color in the browser and so on and so on.
Record. And that's going to enhance the user experience because, oh, this is great. I visited this before. It's remembered what I visited, and it's given me some ideas for what I should go and view or access next time. Still with only one attribute being provided. Now, in Australia, that's not a problem because our IDPs will happily release this to anybody who asks for it. But in the EU and in the United States and possibly other countries, there may be issues in even just getting this one anonymous identifier, pseudonymous identifier released. So PAL and Refeds and the eduGAIN group have worked on a mechanism to help get this attribute released, and it's a pseudo-anonymous concept. So we have pseudo-anonymous category. That if a service provider wants this particular attribute, they can go and ask their federation operator to sign them up to that particular entity category, and it will be marked in their metadata that they are part of this entity category and should be entitled to a set of attributes the entity category describes. I'll have a quick look at the entity category shortly. But that will only work for identity providers that also sign up and state that they're doing pseudo-anonymous or supporting pseudo-anonymous entity category.
So it's a tool to do automatic attribute release or manual attribute release based on a good decision. So it's totally okay to run things with or without automatic, but you get the information you need to be able to release the data. These entity categories also require that the service has a privacy policy that defines and describe how they manage the personal data. So the users can be informed.
So before we jump into the pseudo-anonymous, there's one that's around the anonymous entity category. We'll have a quick look at this definition. It says, a wee bit bigger. Syntax, registration criteria, which is what I was just saying. A service provider displays its display name and user information URL and its metadata in English, and the service provider provides one or more contacts in its metadata. So the bar to become a service that requires this particular indicator is fairly low. Don't really need to do too much. You need to do a little bit of work, not much. And in the attribute bundle, it wants organization and affiliation, but it doesn't have that unique identifier. And as I said before, they can get the PAL identified before they can get the organization just out of the SAML information, but they can also, if they use this ND category, get the organization name from an attribute that's passed back, and they can get the user's affiliation. So is this a person, a staff person? Are they a student person? Are they an affiliate? Are they an alumni, etc.? So there's a little bit more information than just nothing, or just this, a bland identifier or pseudo-anonymous identifier that they can use to get this, if they use this particular one. And a lot of services or a number of publishers will have different rules if you're a staff person or if you're a student person.
So organization is not the name organization in this case, because that you get from metadata. This is a unique identifier for the organization. So it's the domain name of the organization. So it's machine readable, machine handleable, because the name, two universities can have the same name in different countries. So it must be unique some way or another. Yeah.
I think UK Federation used to have an issue that they would strip names that were similar or too similar to their own institutions from the metadata feeds, simply because people might pick the wrong institution and try to type in their username and password in someone else's. And there are certain, Royal School for the Art. There's like a Royal School for the Art in nearly every country. Well, even there's in your country, there's in the Netherlands, there's, so it's like which, and if the interface localizes into your language, then you get local school of the art in your own language multiple times, and you're not sure which Royal School for the Art is. Yeah.
There's a number of Victorian universities.
Yeah, of course.
Heap of those.
So human readable names are good for humans, but not good for anything else.
So going to the next level, which is where we're at, which is the pseudo-anonymous. It's got 3 requirements for a service provider to meet. And it's got proven document need for the pseudo-anonymous information, forms the attribute bundle. So they have a requirement. The service provider committed data minimization. So they only request a minimal set of data that they need. And pretty much the same too as the previous one, that they have a display name, information URL, privacy statement. The other one didn't have a privacy statement, so they didn't need it. So this is some more. They need a privacy statement to go along with the information URL and the display name. And again, they need that contact information in the metadata. And here we get some more information that can be provided to the service provider. We get the organization, which is the machine readable one. We get that pseudo-anonymous pairwise unique identifier. So those are the ones that target ID, the name ID, yeah, and pairwise. They get the affiliation, so it's the same as the anonymous one, and they get a level of assurance, which Al talked about earlier.
If they handle assurance decrypted, because that is an option.
Yep. So if they do all the assurance stuff, then the IDP is capable and allowed to provide that assurance information, and it should do, if it's requested. So with the pseudo-anonymous, they get much more information. They can do a lot more for the user to improve their user experience.
Still not user. It's very user privacy focused.
Got org name, got affiliation, got something else that I've gotten already. And optionally, we have assurance.
You need to adhere to the assurance framework, but you don't need to release specific assurance data. That's the thing.
So that's better. The service provider will be happy if they want to collect this information and start using this information and protecting their information or their content with an assured user account, then pseudo-anonymous is the way to go forward. If they only want to know that the person's a student and a technical name for their organization, then anonymous is the way to go.
An extreme use of this is that you really need to know it's the same person logging in every time. So you do pairwise and you do multi-factor authentication, but you don't care who the person is. That's an extreme. That's a research case.
So what else could a service provider want when connecting to a federation? They might want to communicate with the user. Offline with the user. That's what communicate to save me life. So how would a service communicate with the user in an offline mode? What information would they need to be able to send them some sort of message? There? Anybody? If I wanted to send you some message, what would I use? I'm not going to use Slack. Not using physical mail. Nope. Use offline.
I use Slack in my company to communicate with my boss and so on. And with my friend, I use some SNS service line and so on.
So how do you send your finance system or
How do you contact your grandmother?
Grandma, SNS.
Oh no, she's too funky.
So how do you send your finance department your invoices?
Sorry.
How do you send them receipts and stuff from the conference? How do you send your boss a request for going to this conference? Yeah, someone said it. Email.
Oh.
So if a service wants to communicate with an end user offline, so they've logged in and they want to send, the user's logged out and the service wants to say, hey, there's a special deal on this content, or there's new content available, or this content's been updated, or we'd like you to join us in a webinar, they'll need an email address. So that's the next sort of stuff that our service provider might want to get. Email address to contact the user. But when the user's contacted, I don't want to say, hey, dear Mr. XYZ123964-#9, whatever. So what other information would the service provider want to make a friendly email for the user? Friendly.
Or friendly user experience on the website.
So dear something. What would that something be?
Yeah, name. That's totally correct.
So they'd want a name.
Personalization.
Personalization, yeah.
Yeah.
And they can come in various shapes and forms. Have your surname plus your first name, or you can have a display name. Okay. So if they get all of this information, they can say, oh, dear Terry, I've got my first name, at my email address. I'd love you to join my webinar because you've joined this service previously and we want to do more for you. Or if they're a bit more formal, I could say, dear Terry Smith, use my first name and my surname together, and offer me something in a more formal way. And if they want to be even more formal, possibly more formal, depends on how the university provides display name. It might have, my university might put my title and my name in there. Depends on the university, what they provide in display name. Yeah, so they can put in whatever they like. But I thought it was free text.
A display name is if you look at the entity category, you will see
Oh, right.
it's defined as your real name. Yeah.
Missed that one. It was in the schema, it's not.
Well, so that's classical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, want some more information, but that information isn't provided generally, so we need another entity category for that stuff. So let's go and have a look back at the refeds page, and we've got this personalized access. With that.
Yeah, we have also the old RNS. They are more or less the same, different identifiers.
So the personalized access entity category, all its details are here. We go down, the registration criteria for a service provider. So the service provider needs to prove that it needs this information. The service provider has committed to data minimalization. So it only asks for the minimal set of stuff that it needs from the list that's available. And it assures it meets the following technical requirements. And these are the same as the pseudo-anonymous with display name, information, URL, and a privacy statement. And a contact detail in the metadata. And what they get for all this effort, they get the organization. That's great. They get the user identifier. This one is, this one's a slightly different one to the pairwise one. This is a subject ID. So that's
the difference between pairwise ID and subject ID, or eduPerson targeted ID and eduPerson principal name, is that for pairwise ID, it's different. The ID is different between every service. For subject ID, it's the same for all services. So it's traceable between services.
They also get the person's name in the various flavors, their email address. So those are the two new attributes that are added to this entity category above the pseudo-anonymous one. They get affiliation and assurance if it's being done by the identity provider. And then there's some more detailed descriptions about the various attributes. Let's see where Carl tells me display name. Let's talk about display name.
It may not be there. It may be in another place. No, it is in the LDAP standard. It's defined as the person's name.
All right.
Yeah. In a way that the person thinks his name is.
I've got three of them at least.
Yeah.
Various flavors and shape. Yeah. So that's the sort of attributes that you can get if you're an entity category, if your service is part of the entity category called personalized entity category.
Go back to the list of attributes here. If you no, you can do it. You can do there. So when you're looking at these list of attributes, they are the same things that you get out of an email. Nothing more, nothing less. When you're sending an email, you normally send your mail address. You have an identifier in the mail. You don't know that you have it, but you have an identifier in the mail. You have your personal name normally. And you have the organization, which organization you're sending it from. So it's more or less the same data that you get in an email. We call this mostly harmless attributes.
So when you go back to talk to your universities and saying to make your researchers experience when using the Federation as good as possible, you need to be able to release these attributes when requested. And as Carl said, these are fairly harmless attributes. There's nothing really going to destroy the world if this information gets out, because it's already out there. So if your security people say, no, we need to have all this process and committees and everything to make a decision about this stuff, so it's not the right way to go. You need to make the stuff as available as possible when requested through these categories.
So when we have looked at this in our part of the world for quite a long time, if we don't do this, do the data minimization by anonymous, and personalized, users will find other ways to get into the service. That is worse. That is less good. So please help your home organizations to release this type of data. Do an informed decision of doing this. It's very important, of course, but you don't need to do this informed decision for every service. It's more doing it for the group of services. And what we have learned is that users don't go to services they don't need to use. So they don't log into every service that is available. They don't log into 9,000 services. They may log into 5 services because that's one they need to use for the work.
I've just jumped over to the research and scholarship entity category, which is an older entity category. And this one's actually got a restriction on what the service, an additional restriction to what the service can do or can be. And let's try to find that. Yeah, so in this one, candidates for research and scholarship entity category are service providers that are operated for the purpose of supporting research and scholarship interactions, collaboration, or management, at least in part.
And that has been a big problem.
Yeah, it's my boss's fault.
Yeah, no, it's not your boss's fault. It's a problem with the definition. The definition is not clear enough. So different countries, different federations, different organizations define what this means differently.
It's purposefully ambiguous and unambiguous for an English speaker, right? But other languages will interpret the exact same sentence differently. So, and that's, yeah.
So define an English speaker. The Aussies define, there's one way, the UK people another way, the Americans a third way. So, yeah.
Well, in Australian English is the canonical version, right? Because the British don't even learn English or teach it to their children any longer. So, and we doubt that the Americans ever did speak English. So actually, maybe only the Australians, the New Zealanders, and South Africans are the ones that preserve the language, and you should defer to us. I fully believe that.
So you're talking about the same thing we have in between Finland and Sweden. Finland Swedish is more accurate than Swedish.
I know, and this is I've asked various. One of my favorite TV shows is The Bridge, and it's in Danish and Swedish. And I do not understand either language, but there are clearly jokes about the pronunciation of words, and they make fun of each other in the show, and you know that there's a joke going on. And I think I asked Leif, and he said that's because the Danish think they can speak Swedish.
Okay, let's stop with the silliness.
Danish, Swedish.
So for a service provider to do RNS, and that's been fairly popular for a long while now. A good number of IDPs and services actually support and use this one. The service enhances the research and scholarship activities of some subset of the user community. Been very vague. Service provider metadata has been submitted to the registration for the registrar for publication, and meets these following technical requirements.
So if anyone wonders what registrar is, it's a federation operator.
It's you guys, us guys.
It's just another word.
And we actually in AF have some checks to make sure that they're doing all of this stuff appropriately before we tick them off and say, you're allowed to do RNS. We
too.
Yep. Can't just say everyone can get it because some of them might not meet these requirements. What have we got? Service provider, it's a production SAML deployment, supports SAML HTTP post, claims to refresh federation metadata at least daily. So this is a bit old, this one. Federation service provider provides a name, information URL in the metadata, and the service provider provides one or more technical contacts in the metadata. So similar sort of stuff to the newer personalized ND category, but the personalized ND category is more open and uses a more modern set of user identifiers, unique identifiers for the user. So it's a little bit spaced out here. So we've got shared user identifier, person name, email address, and the optional affiliation. Very similar to the...
Go down, yeah, stay there. Here, look at what identifier is. Identifier persistence. If you use eduPerson principal name and it's not reassignable, you should only send eduPerson principal name. But if it is reassignable, you should send both eduPerson principal name and eduPerson target ID. That is a real problem. We had one service that, based on this discussion, didn't trust eduPerson principal name at all.
And many people just don't have defined policies of whether they reuse principal name, right? Because it's made up of username and the domain, and so most people don't intend to recycle them, but sometimes you'll delete an account when the user has graduated, and your account provisioning system may in fact reassign that username to a future student. And so while that isn't your intention, it can sometimes happen. But it's actually something worth thinking about in your organization if you have the chance, because increasingly people are promoting lifelong learning. They're promoting alumni being connected to the organization indefinitely so you can get money or whatever out of them or get them to re-enroll. So it's now becoming less likely that people would reuse accounts because you want to have a lifelong account. But check, because
And that is the real difference between RNS and personalized. In personalized uses subject ID as an identifier, and that is per default non-reassignable. You can never reassign that to anyone.
And so you should key that off something immutable in your database when it's generated. It's generated dynamically from a seed value, but for instance, often it will be creation time in an LDAP directory, because the creation time will be millisecond precision, and they'll be unique for people. Or you'll have an account, like an internal numeric count ID that you use. You just need to make sure that when you back up your systems and you reinstall them in a disaster recovery scenario, that you actually back that immutable value up and reassign it when you restore. You don't just restore to a situation where you would regenerate those values, because that way dragons lie and you'll end up mucking up things.
But if you have principal name non-reassignable, you can use the same value.
So our service providers wants to make his service a personalized experience for the user. They want to be friendly. They want to send them emails and notifications out of offline. So the personalized access indicator is the way to go. It's all good so far.
Add the unique identify attribute here also somewhere.
Oh, yes. Unique ID. So they can record the history of that person and play back and know where the person's been before, track that usage of that particular individual to some degree.
Even between systems.
Okay, so where are the problems? So what sort of problems could a service provider that says, I want to do one of these ND categories, I'm expecting some great attributes from the IDPs in the federation space to support me, and my researchers are trying to log in from universities in Sweden, in Holland, in Denmark, in Japan, in wherever, and they're continually complaining that it's not working. So why do you think it might not be working? Given that these ND categories are fairly new, not all identity providers are actually implementing them yet. But it's not widely or not fully implemented across the federation space. So there's a couple of reasons for that. Battery time again. Sorry, just bear with me. So there's a number of potential reasons identity providers in Federation don't do these ND categories. And the first and most obvious one is they don't know about it. Don't know about them, not ND categories. So if the identity provider doesn't know that there's ND categories they can support with their IDP, then they're not going to implement it because they don't know that they need to implement it. And I think there's a lot of federations that are around that haven't put the message out or made it available or given the identity providers the technical knowledge that they need to do to update their configuration of their IDPs to make these ND categories available. So that's the first reason, and that's probably a reason there's a fairly large majority of IDPs don't do this yet. The second reason is that their federation doesn't support these entity categories. And this may be because the federation operator is unaware of these entity categories. I've spoken about these several times to this audience, so I expect you at least understand or know the terminology. You may not have implemented it yet. You may not have added these ND categories to your federation management tool, to Jagger. You may not have the policy framework in place or the procedures in place to be able to verify that a service is entitled to get these ND categories when they ask for them. And if the service isn't asking for them because they don't know about it, then you're never going to get that question anyway. So there's a lot of knowledge transfer and communications that are still required to get this information from Refed Central out to the federations, out to the IDPs, out to the service providers. So these are the obvious reasons. Now for the more esoteric or historic reasons. And back. And the worst one ever is that IDPs don't want to. And we know in Europe and the US, they're very reluctant to release any attributes to anybody for any reason, no matter what. And that's a real big problem with the eduGAIN and Federation at the moment. And I'm sure Brooke and Pal will be able to take this forward and talk to this ad infinitum.
I talk about this all the time, wherever I go. The importance of releasing personal data attributes so the researchers can do their work. Because this is, if you're not releasing this, you are hindrance for the researchers. And that is bad.
Yeah.
Because I come from Sweden, I can always use the analogy, I may hinder the next Nobel Prize taker. Then my university, oh shit, and just do it.
Equally, pals from a country that has much stricter data protection laws than possibly your own. I'm not saying that means you should fly by the wind and just release everything. You need to be cognizant of the impact of that. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's not that your academics will share anyway, are required for journal publications. And so there's a lot of information that's public to them that is not necessarily personal, but it is identifiable information. But sometimes the purpose of their research is that they themselves are identified.
So that's the biggest hindrance. And when the AAF joined, started doing federations, we looked at Europe, who've been doing federations much longer. We looked at the US, and we fairly quickly identified that attribute release was very, very important. And we built that into our rules that IDPs must make a set of 4 attributes available to the Federation. And I'll go through those a bit later on this afternoon about what our core attributes are. And they're a fairly extensive list, and it's made it easier for services to access and get data about users when users access the service, and make it easier for researchers to do their stuff. The other reason it's not as significant, but it is a reason that some IDPs don't have the data. Now, this is less of an issue, but I think it's probably an issue that might appear in some of your up-and-coming federations if you're not running a solid identity management system underneath your IDP, and you're not collecting all of this useful data that will be populated out. I don't know if you guys run an email service for your universities, or do you collect email addresses from your users using bring your own email address? I don't know. If you're doing that, how do you capture that information and then make it available to the Federation if it's needed? Are you capturing the users' names? Is it in a spreadsheet? Is it in a directory service? I think your identity management systems of your universities will need to be reviewed and may need to have additional data being captured then being made available to the Federation. So I'm not sure how much of a problem that is, but I know some universities or some have had issues with, in particular, providing an email address, because they don't actually provide an email service, but they don't provision everybody with an email address. And some services just fail badly if there's no email address. Those services are generally bad services anyway, because they tend to use that email address as a user's identifier. And that's a bad thing, which Al talked about earlier today. So don't use email address as a unique identifier, because it's not. It changes over time.
It's not unique in any way, because different people can have the same mail address over time.
We had a very strange policy at a university I was at once, and if you had the second person with the same name, if a second Terry Smith turned up, that person would get the email address Terry Smith 2, right? But then someone proposed now Terry Smith as an email address is now ambiguous. The first Terry Smith should be reallocated Terry Smith 1, and no one should get Terry Smith, right? Which is clearly, you know, nightmarish. We ended up creating quite a complicated formula so that people could get unique-ish email addresses without resorting to numbers where possible. But we actually had a situation where we used to call it the John Smith problem, but we had a look. Andrew Hall was the most common name at our university. We had 14 of them, and we had 7 Andrew Halls that didn't have middle names. Their name was only Andrew Hall. And so, you know, it's becomes difficult trying to have sort of, people don't guess an email address, right? You don't guess my name, my email address, and just fire it off at random organizations hoping you'll get me, unless you are a spammer. You know, generally, you know, you're somehow given my address, and it's, you know, it's authoritative at the time you get it. And there's really good Danish out in the hallway, as in a pastry. There's also a really good half Danish in here.
So are there any other problems you can conceive of where attribute release is not going to occur? I don't think I have any more. I think these are the main ones. Okay, so how do we solve these problems? First one was about implementation. That's really a communication problem. So tell your folk about entity categories, why it's good to release attributes, and what else we got? Yep. Communicate, let people know that this is how our federation runs. Our federation in AF runs on attributes. Attributes are our oil that keep our federation ticking over smoothly. The next issue is about implementation, the federation level. So the federation operator needs to ensure that they support entity categories. And that's not just, hey, we do it, but we have the tooling for it. We have the processes in place to review and check off that people are entitled to request this stuff, and the policies are all in place. So there's a bit of work that federation operators need to do. And for us in AF, we've done research and scholarship. We're just now moving into pseudo-anonymous, anonymous, and personalized. And I'm currently working on the tools to make it happen. And we have some processes that my team's going to be dealing with. And there's a whole bunch of forms and other things that we need to do to get the processes right. And then I need to get some policies wrapped around that about who's in and who's out. Pretty much just follow the policies that the ND categories are doing and just Australianize them for us. So that's happening for us. And I expect us to be fully supporting those 3 ND categories sometime this year. Depends on my technical team.
That's good. I know only about one other federation that supports them today.
That's you?
That's my federation, yeah. They are new. They are fairly new. They are 3 years old, and it takes time to get those in, especially if the Fed doesn't want them.
Yeah.
That happens quite a lot also.
So the next problems, the I don't want to things. So the AAF has solved this by having a core set of attributes. And when I say core, that's the ones that we expect all IDPs to be able to respond with on request. And that core set of attributes encompasses all of the attribute requirements of all of the ND categories. So if they're providing the core, then it's easy for them to provide the attributes for the ND categories. So we might just jump in here. Look at tool. So this is a little validation service, and we have some documentation in here. And we have categories of attributes. So we have the AF core attributes, the AF conditional attributes, it's just one at the moment, and optional attributes, which nobody supports because they're too lazy. So if we have a look at our core attributes, this hasn't been updated yet to include the SAML name ID or the persistent name ID. Oh, sorry, the pairwise ID. 1, 2, 3, 14, 15, 16, plus 2, there's 18 attributes that we expect our IDPs to be able to support. And none of these are really life-shattering, scary attributes to release. And some of them will be deprecated over time. So I'll just quickly go through them. We've got our shared token, and that's an equivalent to the pairwise ID. We're going to replace this Australian-only attribute over time with the new global pairwise ID. We won't be playing the same as everyone else. Authentication method's not really an attribute. It's really part of the authentication stream. But we've included this because we can actually get how people have authenticated, and it's useful to see that so we can see if people have authenticated using multi-factor authentication or not. We've got a display name, our eduPerson affiliation, eduPerson assurance, and we're updating that to be the new assurance values. We've currently got some old values which are being deprecated. Oh, we never used it. Nobody could get there. Yeah, our assurance values of these odd things like earn, IDP, IAP, ID1, and ID2. And nobody was able to do anything useful with them. They're gone.
I mean, I will caution you about different use cases for attributes because I presume AAF had a huge number of people who wanted this stuff and they implemented it and then no one used it. And I remember in the early days of MAMS 1 and 2, we had a requirement that actually was vacuous, fictitious, right? It was this idea that if we collected all of this additional information about people, we could unlock a service for a very small set of the community. And I said in a meeting about this, well, how do we currently allow people to access this service? You know, what information do we capture about people to know who can and can't? And they say, well, the service actually doesn't exist. But if it ever did exist, we would need this. And it's like, well, go and build that service first, and then we'll deal with the authorization later. And creating these theoretical needs for attributes, actually, it really can slow down your federation. It can cause a lot of consternation between people on whether they should capture it. And for us, this use case, they wanted to capture the sex of every person, of which our uni actually did not capture this information. They wanted ethnicity, and they wanted geographical tribal affiliation. And so that information is obviously very, very sensitive, and it wasn't going to serve a purpose other than collecting a lot of information about people that didn't have anywhere to go.
Very hard to get nowadays for privacy stuff.
Yeah, and I also worked in an organization in the UK for a university, and they tried to survey students for this information, and the students just refused to provide diversity information. So even though they knew that you could walk around campus and see the diversity of people, they had no information to back that up because they actually did not have a legit reason to request all of this information about students.
Nationality, sex, or gender. Yeah, both of them, and preferred sex. Tribal affiliation and other stuff is highly sensitive data within Europe based on legislation. Religious things is also that. So it's very important to have those to be careful what you put into your system and what you release. That's why I'm talking about fairly benign or mostly harmless attributes, because they are more or less the same everywhere in the world. They're more or less needed for day-to-day communication, day-to-day when you talk to people, because I know that you are Nuato. That's the way for me to communicate with you. So that is very important in this case.
But it's not, there are insufficient use cases to actually know a lot of more information about people, you know, their ethnicity, tribal affiliation, potentially religious affiliation. You know, it just becomes very, very difficult. It's difficult to capture. It's difficult to keep accurate and allow that to be personalized by people. And we haven't found any real authentication, authorization use cases that actually need that information, right? And if there was, we would do something about it, but we just haven't seen it. So I caution you in wanting to capture things like passport number or national identification number in your identity management systems. You generally do not need them. They should only be asserted by your driver's license agency, your real national identification services, because they know how to share or not share inevitably that information.
You may need that information for assurance that it's correct person, but you should never release the data.
So going down a list further, we've got education entitlement, and that's hardly ever used. So there's some old values populated occasionally, or access to some of the publishers. The education principal name, and we've tried to ensure that universities provide a non-reassigned education principal name. Scope affiliation, the target ID, we have to get rid of that over time, replaced with the pairwise ID. The email given name, home organisation, and this is the technical name, the type of organisation, the organisation's display name, which is O, assistant name ID, which is the same as the target ID, but it's a name ID, and the surname. There's a couple of doubles up and a couple that are going away. That's our core set of attributes. It covers all of the ND categories that we deal with. So our IDPs are in a fairly good place to be able to provide attributes, and they're willing to do so because we started this and had a culture of releasing attributes from the beginning of the Federation and not tried to bring it in after the Federation's started. I think that's helped us be a very popular and effective Federation.
We more or less have the same attributes and some more based on what our local needs. It's more or less the same.
And as I mentioned, your service provider's local needs. If you don't have a need, don't make it a public one. We have one conditional attribute, which is the eduperson orchid. That hasn't really kicked off or gone that well, but we're still trying to get it as a Federation attribute. And we have 1 million attributes that are optional. We just put them there so that somebody wants to try and get it, they can try, but they'll have to go and talk to the IDP and to get them to configure their service specifically for that attribute.
They will never get the attribute except for some very crucial of them. You have something that we also have. You have AU eduperson legal name. We have NOR eduperson legal name. That is the full legal name on your passport.
One that is one of the optional attributes that's fairly popular is this DSD student ID, and that's used for the My Equals service, which is a service for providing students with their results paid for it, and that need that attribute to work. That's the only optional attribute that gets significant use in our Federation.
Yeah, and we have European student identifier to make students be able to travel between the countries to exchange students. That's also one of ours.
But as a Federation operator, you should identify what attributes are being used or are being required by your services and try and ensure that your IDPs can provide those attributes to, again, provide the oil to make your Federation work. Okay.
And
So,
you get a very long way with a very small set of attributes, right? So you should not stress if you can't get a lot of information, because you get a lot of utility out of, display name and email address in addition to the persistent identifiers. Yeah. So display name, common name, first name, those sorts of strange combinations of those actually get you a very long way.
So our service provider gets lots of good access to lots of good attributes, uses the entity categories, gets a reasonable guarantee that it's going to get these attributes from IDPs that support those entity categories. That's all good. until you actually try and push your service out into eduGAIN. And there are a lot of services, oh, there's not that many services that we push out, but the one that is significant, we've pushed out, and it's got RNS, it's got Certify, but it hasn't got Cocoa.
Oh, it's time to talk about Cocoa.
After the
Yeah, maybe you should only say two words about Cocoa, version 1 and version 2. They are European only. Cocoa is Data Protection Code of Conduct, the European version. It should not be used outside this region because it's heavily depending on law.
We're trying to use it with us being version 2.
Yeah, it's still heavily depending on the GDPR.
Yeah.
So you should not use it outside Europe. You can use it as an inspiration to create your own.
But we needed to get IDPs in your federation to access our service because they're blocking our service because it doesn't request Cocoa. I think, no, it might be the other way around.
Yeah, maybe your users. Yeah.
Can't access services in your federation because they're not doing that.
That's okay, but not the other way around. Services outside EU or whitelisted country cannot use Cocoa.
So we're still trying to understand all of that ourselves. But after afternoon tea, we'll come back and have a look at the issues of getting services from eduGAIN into your federation and how to make those work where they don't do ND categories or whatever. We've got half an hour, I think, for afternoon tea, and we'll see you back here at 1600.